October 18, 1944. Belgium 6 kilometers east of the German border. DO 542 hours. 3 companies of infantry, approximately 400 men, stood at the edge of a forest facing open ground. The sky was still dark, though dawn was less than 30 minutes away. No lights showed anywhere. The only sound was rain falling steadily through the trees, soaking uniforms and equipment. Each man carried a rifle or submachine gun. Machine gun crews had positioned their weapons along the tree line. Barrels pointed east toward the ridgeline 800 meters away. The ridgeline was barely visible, a darker mass against the dark sky. Intelligence reports indicated German defensive positions along that ridge: trenches, bunkers, machine gun nests, possibly artillery observers. The ground between the forest and the ridge was open farmland, sloping gently upward. No cover existed except scattered shell craters from previous bombardments. The battalion commander stood near the center of the formation, 20 meters behind the forward line. His operations officer stood beside him with a map case and a radio. Both men stared toward the ridge. Neither spoke. The rain continued falling. Equipment dripped. Boots sank slightly into mud. The attack was scheduled for your 600 hours. Artillery preparation would begin at yo 5:45 hours. 15 minutes of concentrated fire on the ridgeline, followed by the infantry advance. 18 minutes remained. The men waited in silence. The battalion belonged to an infantry division that had been fighting continuously since the breakout from Normandy in July. Progress through France and Belgium had been steady through August and September, but resistance had stiffened noticeably as Allied forces approached the German frontier. The German army, retreating throughout the summer, had begun to establish defensive positions along natural terrain features: rivers, ridgelines, forests that favored defense. The ridgeline, designated as the battalion's objective, had been under observation for 4 days. Aerial reconnaissance and ground patrols had identified defensive positions, but could not determine their strength. Estimates ranged from 1 reinforced company to a full battalion. Artillery fire on October 16 and 17 had targeted known positions, but damage assessment was inconclusive due to poor weather limiting aerial observation. The battalion commander was a lieutenant colonel, 30, 4 years old, with command experience dating to North Africa in 1943. He had led the battalion through Sicily, Italy, and France. Casualties had been moderate but steady. The battalion's current strength was approximately 60% of authorized levels. Replacements arrived regularly but lacked combat experience. The attack plan was conventional: artillery preparation followed by infantry assault in 3 waves. The first wave would advance to the base of the ridge and establish a support by fire position. The second wave would assault the ridge itself, clearing defensive positions with grenades and automatic weapons. The third wave would exploit any breakthrough and consolidate on the far side of the ridge. Expected duration from start to objective secured 90 minutes. Weather conditions were poor. Rain had been falling since over 300 hours and showed no sign of stopping. Visibility was limited to 600 meters. The ground was soft but not yet impassable. Temperature was 4 degrees Celsius. Conditions favored neither attacker nor defender significantly. though the artillery preparation would be less effective in soft ground, where shells would penetrate before exploding rather than fragmenting above ground. Air support was not available due to weather. Tank support had been requested but denied. The terrain was assessed as unsuitable for armored vehicles in current conditions. Infantry doctrine for assaulting prepared defensive positions emphasized momentum and violence of action. Training stressed the importance of closing quickly with the enemy to minimize exposure to defensive fire during the approach. Once the assault began, hesitation was considered more dangerous than aggressive forward movement. Soldiers were trained to advance under fire, using terrain features and smoke for concealment, and to maintain forward pressure even when taking casualties. The battalion had executed similar attacks 11 times since landing in Normandy. Success rate varied depending on enemy strength and defensive preparation. But the basic pattern was consistent. Artillery disrupted enemy positions and forced defenders to take cover. Infantry advanced while enemy response was suppressed. Assault teams closed with defensive positions and cleared them at close range. Casualties were typically heaviest during the initial approach across open ground and during the final assault on fortified positions. The men in the battalion understood this pattern from experience. The veterans, those who had survived 3 months of continuous combat, knew what to expect when the order to advance was given. They knew the sound of incoming fire, the appearance of machine gun tracers, the impact of artillery. They knew how to move, where to look, when to drop, and when to run. The replacements, some with the battalion for only 2 weeks, had been briefed and trained, but lacked the experiential knowledge that separated survivors from casualties. Machine gun crews had been positioned to provide covering fire during the advance. Their orders were to maintain continuous fire on known enemy positions to suppress defensive response. Mortar teams, positioned farther back in the forest, had pre-registered fire missions on specific points along the ridge line. Ammunition had been distributed. Each rifleman carried at least 120 rounds. Machine gun crews had belt after belt stacked beside their weapons. The artillery preparation was intended to destroy or suppress German positions sufficiently that the infantry advance would encounter reduced resistance. But everyone understood that artillery rarely destroyed well constructed defensive positions. The purpose was disruption. To force defenders under cover, damage communications, create confusion. The infantry would still face organized resistance once they reached the ridge. At 0544 hours, 16 minutes before H hour, the battalion commander received confirmation that artillery batteries were ready to fire on schedule. He acknowledged the transmission without comment. The operations officer marked the time in his notebook. At 0545 hours, the artillery preparation did not begin. Silence continued. Rain fell, the men waited. At 0546 hours, the battalion commander turned to his operations officer and said something inaudible to anyone else. The operations officer nodded and stepped away to use the radio. The transmission was brief. The operations officer returned and spoke quietly to the commander. The commander did not respond. At 0547 hours, the commander walked forward through the trees toward the front line. He moved slowly, picking his way around equipment and personnel. He stopped at the tree line and stood staring toward the ridgeline. Rain ran off his helmet. He remained motionless for approximately 1 minute. At 05:48 hours, he returned to his previous position. He stood without speaking. The operations officer waited beside him. At 05:50 hours, 5 minutes past the scheduled artillery start time, the commander spoke briefly to the operations officer. The operations officer lifted the radio handset and transmitted a single message. The transmission lasted less than 10 seconds. At 05:51 hours, the battalion remained in position at the forest edge. No artillery fire had commenced. No order to advance had been given. The attack had not begun. At 05:52 hours, some of the company commanders began looking back toward the battalion command post. No signals were visible. The radio net remained silent except for routine status checks. The men in the forward positions shifted weight from foot to foot, waiting. Machine gun crews maintained their aim toward the ridgeline, but did not fire. At 05:55 hours, the original H hour passed without action. The infantry remained at the forest edge. Artillery remained silent. The German positions on the ridgeline showed no activity, no movement, no lights, no visible response to the expected but non-existent attack. At 05:58 hours, one of the company commanders sent a runner back to battalion headquarters, requesting clarification. The runner arrived at 0600 hours and was directed to wait. No explanation was provided. The sky began to lighten gradually. Dawn was approaching. Visibility improved incrementally. The ridgeline became more distinct. Individual trees visible against the skyline. Still no movement from German positions. Still no orders from battalion. At 06:05 hours, 10 minutes past H hour, a second company commander sent a runner with the same request for orders. The runner was also told to wait. At 06:10 hours, the battalion commander gathered his company commanders at the command post. The meeting lasted 4 minutes. No raised voices were heard. When the meeting concluded, the company commanders returned to their units. No orders were issued to the companies. The men remained in position. At 06:15 hours, 30 minutes past the scheduled start of the artillery preparation, the battalion was still positioned at the forest edge. Dawn had arrived. Visibility extended to approximately 1,000 meters. The ridgeline was clearly visible. German defensive positions could be identified by their characteristic shapes: bunker openings, trench lines, wire obstacles. No defenders were visible, but that was expected. Soldiers in defensive positions remained under cover. At 06:20 hours, the operations officer transmitted a message to division headquarters. The transmission was longer than previous communications, approximately 45 seconds. Division acknowledged. No follow-up orders were transmitted. The wait continued. 45 minutes had now passed since the scheduled start of the attack. The battalion remained in assault positions but had not moved forward. The artillery preparation had not occurred. German positions showed no reaction. At 06:25 hours, the battalion commander issued orders to withdraw to assembly areas 1 kilometer west of the current positions. The withdrawal would be conducted in sequence. Third wave companies first, then second wave, finally first wave. Movement would begin at 06:30 hours. The reason for the cancellation was transmitted to division headquarters at 06:20 hours in the operations officer's extended radio message. The content, as later documented in the battalion's war diary, was stated in operational terms. Observed enemy defensive preparation exceeds intelligence estimate. Forward positions indicate battalion, strength defensive force with extensive fortification. Artillery preparation assessed as insufficient to reduce defensive capability to acceptable level for assault success. Battalion strength currently at 58%. Assessment. Assault would result in excessive casualties without corresponding operational gain. Recommend postponement pending additional artillery support and intelligence clarification. The battalion commander's decision was based on observation conducted during the period between 05:45 and 06:20 hours. As dawn light improved visibility, the extent of German defensive preparation became clearer. What had been assessed as company strength positions revealed themselves as more extensive. Additional trench lines visible farther back from the crest, more bunkers than previously identified, wire obstacles in depth rather than single barriers. The commander's assessment was procedural. The artillery preparation allocated to the attack, 15 minutes of divisional artillery fire, was calibrated for suppressing a company defensive position. It was insufficient for a battalion defensive position with extensive fortification. An assault under these conditions would require the attacking infantry to overcome defensive fire from 3 to 4 times the expected number of weapons, while advancing across 800 meters of open ground with no cover. The battalion's current strength, 58% of authorized, meant it could not absorb the casualties such an assault would produce and remain combat effective. Loss estimates for an assault against a properly prepared battalion defensive position typically ranged from 20 to 40% of the attacking force. 20% casualties would reduce the battalion to approximately 45% strength, below the threshold for effective offensive operations. The commander made no appeal to preservation of life. His written report to division cited operational mathematics, insufficient fire support, enemy strength exceeding estimate, unit strength insufficient to accept expected casualties and maintain effectiveness. The decision was calculated rather than emotional. Division headquarters acknowledged the report and authorized withdrawal to assembly areas pending reassessment of the objective and allocation of additional support. At 0630 hours, the 3rd Wave companies began withdrawing from the forest edge. Movement was conducted slowly and quietly. Men picked up equipment and moved rearward through the trees in small groups. Machine gun crews disassembled their weapons and carried them by sections. The withdrawal was covered by the 1st Wave companies, which remained in position until the rear elements had cleared the area. By 0645 hours, 2/3 of the battalion had withdrawn. The German positions on the ridgeline showed no reaction. No fire was received. No movement was observed from enemy positions. The withdrawal continued without incident. At 0650 hours, the 1st Wave companies began their withdrawal. They moved in bounds, one platoon covering while another moved, then alternating. The movement was professional and controlled. By 07:05 hours, all companies had cleared the forest and were moving west along covered approach routes toward the assembly areas. The assembly areas were located in a valley 1 kilometer west shielded from German observation by terrain. Companies arrived in sequence between 07:20 and 07:45 hours. Once assembled, the battalion established defensive positions and conducted equipment checks. Hot food was brought forward from field kitchens. Ammunition was redistributed. No orders for immediate operations were issued. At 0800 hours, the battalion commander met with his staff to prepare a detailed report for division headquarters. The report would include updated intelligence on enemy defensive positions based on dawn observations, revised casualty estimates for various attack scenarios, and recommendations for future action. The report was completed by 0930 hours and transmitted to division. No discussion of the canceled attack occurred among the companies. The men ate, cleaned weapons, rested. Some slept. The battalion had been in assault positions since 0400 hours and had not engaged. The physical release from tension was visible. Soldiers sat with weapons beside them rather than at ready, helmets removed, talking quietly or not talking at all. By 1000 hours, the battalion had transitioned from assault posture to defensive posture. Patrols were sent out to maintain contact with adjacent units. Observation posts were established. Routine continued. The battalion war diary entry for October 18, 1944, contains one paragraph describing the canceled attack. Battalion moved to assault position 0400 hours, objective Hill 247. Attack scheduled 0600 hours, cancelled 06:25 hours due to enemy strength exceeding intelligence estimate and insufficient fire support. Battalion withdrew to assembly areas without contact. No casualties. Detailed report submitted to Division 0930 hours. No after-action review was conducted because no action had occurred. The intelligence estimate was updated based on improved observation, but no formal inquiry examined why the initial estimate had been inaccurate. Reconnaissance reports from October 14-17 were reviewed and found to contain correct information that had been interpreted conservatively. The error was not in collection, but in assessment. No commendation was issued to the battalion commander for the decision to cancel the attack. No criticism was recorded. Division headquarters accepted the operational rationale without comment. The decision was treated as routine, a tactical adjustment based on current conditions. The attack on Hill 247 was reassigned to a different battalion with additional artillery support. The attack occurred on October 22 with 30 minutes of preparatory fire from twice the number of batteries. The objective was taken after 4 hours of fighting. Casualties to the attacking battalion: 40. 7 killed, 130, 1 wounded. Approximately 31% of the attacking force. Whether the October 18 attack would have produced similar or higher casualties cannot be determined. The October 22 attack benefited from 4 additional days of intelligence collection and twice the artillery support. Direct comparison is not valid. The 400 men who stood at the forest edge on October 18 and did not advance were not aware of the commander's reasoning. Most assumed the attack had been postponed due to weather or higher-level operational changes. The cancellation was not discussed formally. It became one incident among hundreds during months of continuous operations. The battalion commander continued in command through November 1944, when he was wounded during operations near Aachen and evacuated to England. He returned to duty in January 1945 and commanded the battalion through the final months of the war. He was promoted to colonel in April 1945. After the war, he remained in the Army and retired in 1962 as a brigadier general. In a 1968 oral history interview conducted for the Army War College, he was asked about difficult command decisions during World War II. He discussed several incidents involving allocation of limited resources and coordination between units under fire. When asked specifically about decisions not to attack, he mentioned weather delays and coordination failures. He did not reference October 18, 1944 specifically. The interviewer did not ask about individual canceled operations. He died in 1977. His personal papers were donated to a military archive and include maps, photographs, and some correspondence, but no diary or detailed memoir. The October 18 incident is not mentioned in any document beyond the official war diary entry. The operations officer who transmitted the cancellation message served with the battalion until February 1945, when he was transferred to division staff. He completed his service in Europe and returned to civilian life in 1946. He was not interviewed for any historical project. He died in 1989. Of the approximately 400 men present on October 18, records indicate that 214 survived the war. Post-war documentation shows that 9 were interviewed for various oral history projects between 1965 and 2000. None mentioned the October 18 canceled attack without specific prompting. When researchers cross-referenced participant names with the October 18 operation, and 3 veterans recalled waiting at a forest edge for an attack that did not occur. None remembered the specific date or location. One mentioned that canceled operations were common enough that individual incidents blurred together. Hill 247 is now farmland. The defensive positions constructed by German forces in October 1944 were filled in during post-war land reclamation. The forest where the battalion assembled still exists, though logging has altered its extent. No marker indicates that 400 men waited there one morning and then withdrew without fighting. The battalion war diary for October 1944 is archived in a climate-controlled facility accessible to researchers. The volume contains daily entries in standardized format: positions, movements, casualties, significant events. The entry for October 18 occupies 8 lines. No supporting documents are attached beyond the operations report transmitted to division headquarters. Division records show that the canceled October 18 attack was not mentioned in higher-level operational summaries. The October 22 attack that successfully took Hill 247 was recorded in divisional and corps reports as a successful operation. The October 18 cancellation was not referenced. What remains is 400 men standing at a forest edge in darkness and rain. A battalion commander staring toward a ridgeline as dawn revealed what intelligence had not. A radio transmission lasting 45 seconds. Companies withdrawing quietly through trees. An objective not taken because one commander pulled back. No artillery fire. No assault. No engagement. No casualties. The advance that went nowhere after one commander pulled back.